Welcome to Ferment Radio, a podcast series on bacterial and social fermentation. Fermentation can incite social actions, spark creativity, and bring surprising new tastes to our lives. My name is Aga Pokrivka, and I invite you to join us in a conversation on living interconnectivities, from macro to micro, from societal to cellular, and from global to personal. On Ferment Radio, we have often talked about how artists use technology and science in order to tackle the microbial world. Do you remember the episode Play That Fungi Music with Tosca Terán? Or interspecies collaborations with Mindaugas Gapševičius? Some people refer to this kind of practice as bioart, the happy place where experimentation and process are more important than concrete results. Our guest today is Laura Beloff, an artist and researcher working at the intersection of art, science, and technology. Laura is also associate professor and head of the Visual Cultures Curating and Contemporary Art program at Aalto University in Helsinki, Finland. On this episode of Ferment Radio, we will delve into the dynamic interdisciplinary niche that likes to collaborate with microbes, reflect on the ethics of working with living organisms, and discuss the incompatibility of a creative endeavor with a neoliberal reality. Oh, and we will also talk about ticks. As Laura Beloff points out, artists are antennas for societal moods, and there is a reason why they engage with microbes. And what's the reason? Stick around and tune into the 29th episode of Ferment Radio to find out.
I'm Laura Beloff. I often say that I'm accidental academic. So I come from the arts background, and somehow I'm one foot quite heavily at the moment in academia since quite some years now. And why I say it's accidental, because I never planned an academic career. So my academic career is not the typical one. It has much more hurdles, and that of course come when you're an artist and you're not quite sure who you are and you're interested. But of course academia in some sense also provides certain kind of possibilities which might be tougher than if you're independent. But I've been both. So that's basically me, I think.
I think academia also gives interesting way to structure thoughts, right? Because
yes,
I think art doesn't come with such a strict or specific way of forming.
Yeah, well, that's good and bad.
Yeah,
both, because it does institutionalize your thoughts and you, and if you fit the frame, everything is fine. If you don't, it might be quite complex to try to be in there. So there is both sides. If you're able to kind of live with it without it kind of feeling some sort of a overlaid structure, then I think it's fine. I think my case is like that. Maybe I'm able to somehow use the benefits more than having the restrictions or kind of feeling those. But of course, one is aware of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm. I guess this is also about like question like what research is being funded at the moment and what not, and how much one can be independent within this kind of a structure, right? But it's the same with arts in a way.
Yes, that's a good point, because even if one thinks, the art is so much free, and sometimes some scientists say that to me, I always try to tell them that, well, the art world has certain kind of expectations. And they are not that different from what is in science and technology. But what kind of things are funded? I think at the moment, maybe it's a neoliberalistic values a little bit. A lot of kind of scientific research is often quick results, and the kind of deep down based research is not that well, I think, funded at the moment. I hear it from many. So these are of course questions one can ask. It's difficult to say because I think earlier the base research has been more funded and maybe that has been more kind of single heroes and so on. Now there's maybe more chances. But in the long run, what is the result? In some sense, I think maybe it's off the balance a little bit, but I am not to judge that actually, as I'm looking at it only from the art. So that's, yeah.
But working already through years with art and technology, I wonder about your motivation, what kind of attracted you to there? And because I also suspect that this motivation is changing over the years, since art and technology changes a lot.
Yeah, it shifts. Maybe the motivations, I mean, curiosity is definitely one. I think any artist and scientist is driven by curiosity. That's a driving force. But what else motivates me? Why do I work with these issues? I guess there are some reasons. One of them is definitely that when you start looking more and more into science and technology development, and you wonder why is art not included? It seems everything else but humanities and arts is its own world. That is probably the one question that comes, but also what that means. So why are they not included, and why should society be kind of accepting everything with the blue eyes what is done in sciences? So in a way, maybe part of the motivation is also this, that it's important that there are different kind of people dealing and looking at these. Are they innovations or developments, and also pushing criticism into that field? So I think those are part. Another part is, of course, that's probably a character question, that even if one criticizes, I'm very curious to experience and look at things myself before any judgment. So to investigate and then form your own views on those. I think that's another.
But I don't know if it's just my impression, but since, I don't know, I am active as an artist for how many years? Like 10 or 15 years. And from my perspective, this interest in like of working with like a non-human but living species kind of increased, or it's something much more common than I remember, or it's maybe my own learning curve that, you do not pay attention to something that you are not so familiar with. First of all, do you agree with this, what I just said? And second of all, why would this be so? Do you think that actually there is a rise of interest in working with non-human factors?
Yeah, definitely there is. It's in all fields, I think. Well, I cannot speak of science, but humanities, post-humanities, and in the arts, definitely in the last, I think, 10 years, we've seen a huge increase in this. And already before that, one can sort of allocate a trajectory of this. Definitely, yes. Why that is? I think it's the crisis, climate crisis, environmental crisis, that people are more aware. And I often say that artists in some sense are antennas for society. And I think that's why artists already quite early on started looking into these areas. At the same time, there's what I find interesting, just going back to the technology a little bit, as you referenced earlier, that technology, or the kind of relation from art to technology, is changing. I somehow think these are a little bit maybe related also. A lot of artists might just work with one and not the other, but there's also artists, also like me, who work across this. So often, and this is often the biological things and technological things are in separate camps. However, I think in the developments this has sort of emerged a little bit together, and this is of course because developments of synthetic biology, gene editing technologies, where technology enters the biology and technological thinking enters biological field. So I think there is something like that happening, and these are not they are not isolated incidents. I think they are somehow connected.
Mm-hmm. It made me think that I remember when kind of a interactive art term entered my consciousness. I was debating with myself a lot about borders of how interactive and kind of open form artwork can be, because at the end it's a system designed by the artist, and you just maybe you do not see the walls of this box, but that still it's a playground with walls. And it made me think that artists who are working with I don't know, bacteria, plants, algae, whatever, trees. There's so many of that these days. I think that in a big part, the aim of this art is to question the relationship between human and other species and kind of dominance of a human itself. But if a human works with the other non-human species, isn't it also executing power over them?
Yeah, definitely. This is one of my questions, is this, that while humans have developed the technologies we use, now referencing, of course, mainly maybe the recent decades, the digital technologies, that is completely, everything of that is built from a human perspective, and usually for the benefit of humans as well. So that leaves out non-humans. And if they are included, like I referenced the synthetic biology or these areas, they are often included as a resource for humans. So of course, I think one should point criticism there or be aware of that. This is of course what the science does without often pointing to it or questioning it. But it's also, there are many artists, like you say now, working with these and even sometimes maybe claiming kind of interspecies, communications and so on. I often question, is it reciprocal? I think it's often one way. And in that sense, I would be very careful in doing that, because as I work with non-humans, I'm very well aware that I'm not doing very kind things for them. On the other hand, who am I to say what is kind for them?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's of course, and this is something, I think humans, we're very dominant species. I really think so. And I think that one ability what we have is that we can create awareness. We might not be able to change so at least rapidly ourselves and our dominance, but when we create an awareness, it maybe makes already a bit of a difference of considering twice what you're doing. But these are sort of all the time this kind of two-faced issues. At the same time as I'm saying I'm not doing kind things, then I'm looking at science. They don't much care about these questions. At the same time, they might do quite important developments, at least from the human perspective. So these are, but yeah, the technology is definitely driven by human, and I don't know what it would be if it would include non-humans, because if it's just us developing it again, so it's a difficult questions. I don't know. What are you thinking?
Maybe it is so that many things, they start from words. Like if we do not talk about things or we do not name things, then it's very hard to move on, or you will not be even aware that you moved on. So I think that it's a good start. Like now we are talking about it. There are words to name those things that, for example, we are, like the borders of human body are much more blurred than we ever kind of acknowledge it. And I think that's good, but something which makes me wonder is, so what's the next step?
Yeah.
Because if we end up just talking about it like, oh yeah, this is multi-species and we are part of nature, whoa, and we are just another animal, yeah, and we have more bacteria in our body than cells. But then, so what does it actually make us, right?
Oh, what does it imply? One can ask also, because if we say we are part of nature, wouldn't that reference then that as a dominant species, we can just do like we have been doing? In some sense, we could just claim this is a typical characteristic of this species, what we are part of. So these are, I think these are some of the issues what maybe not all the kind of humanities or other theories have addressed, because they are difficult questions for us also. That what does it actually mean to be part of nature or kind of consider us equal to the others? Because nature also, the non-humans, if you look at that systems or ecosystems, they're very cruel.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a different awareness at least, but maybe they also have. Again, how should we know? So these are all kind of speculations in that sense, yeah.
I'm thinking now about the, methods of decentralized or horizontal organizing, that maybe we could use a little bit of that, because in those methods there is a lot about just acknowledging the current power structure we are having. And if we acknowledge it and we are very honest about this, then eventually it's not about removing these power structures, because not all power structures are actually wrong. Like, it's kind of inevitable. There will be always some power structures, but then how you work with it. Because I'm now thinking about my cat. I have power over my cat. If I don't feed her, she's screwed. She has a problem. She doesn't go out. So yeah, I acknowledge that I have this power over her, but maybe I should be aware that I don't use this power over her beyond that. Because I could, for example, I don't know, starve her so she loves me more or whatever, then it starts to be sick. So maybe, yeah, I'm just laughing, but because my cat is such a source of inspiration. So maybe that's why this example of her. But do you have in mind artwork which really moved you, or which would kind of go beyond just the words we collaborate with, microbes, or we collaborate with plants, and then also...
that's a difficult question nowadays. Yeah. Are there works which have really... Of course there are works which have really moved me. I can't now recall anything, but this maybe I have to think a little bit. Earlier you said something which I thought very interesting. You said about something like art and then making science where things get more complex. That moment when you said that, I suddenly had this thought that when people look at art, there's often, I think, underlying expectation on that it's eternal. There's this 100-year, 200-year of tableau or something like that it lasts, and it's good now, but it will be good in 100 years still, and it will be perfect. And that moment then, when you said, then when one just start with science and technology, realized science and technology don't have that. It's all about next step. It's all about, okay, someone has developed this, I'm picking up this and I take it further because I have this idea. So I don't know what to say, but I just realized this difference, that sort of a moment. And I think there's something interesting in that. And that now, I reference back now what you asked me, are there works that move, or when we work with the sort of non-humans, often these works, same than technological works, need instructions or need a text, somehow. So it's a little bit different state of mind, isn't it, than sometimes experiencing some work which really affects you almost bodily. So I can't come up with any names. Maybe it comes later in the head because, but right now. But it's an interesting thing. So why should one, in that sense, make this kind of complex art where you need to learn? I don't know. But it's also interesting, isn't it? Because if I go to an exhibition, I spend more time with works which puzzle me and which I don't necessarily immediately understand, even the field or anything. I'm like, what is this? What has the person thought? Where's the and then I might go and try to read a little bit if there's a text around it or something. I try to kind of grab the person, but those stop me. But that might be also as being kind of professional in the arts, that it's this kind. So I don't necessarily go after pleasure. I go after new thoughts.
I also wonder about those divisions now. Like, so we are now in art and technology and science. We got the vocabulary to name different actors. But then it's also a question how much naming those doesn't actually support the divisions itself, because suddenly we see those differences, no? If we need to feel more part of a whole, then if that's really a way.
How to do that. One of the things I think which is in some sense maybe hindering this kind of, let's say, a true cross-disciplinary work across different disciplines, whatever they are, is the funding. The funding structures are built with this kind of categories. It's either science or it's art or so on. So when you write a funding application, you have to say, what's the output of that? And then you have to kind of define the output to a certain field. And there you are already with this division. So I think there would be much more interesting probably projects and research projects that would really be crossover if you could easier get funding in a way that you could say it is a new field between this and this, you know, instead of trying to fit into the existing ones. And I think that's, I often see the funding as one of the major problems in sort of having the development taking another step. It's also because science and technology, it is known, has a little bit more fundings than arts has. And because of that it's fairly easy for them, not easy, but it is fairly possible, let's say, for them to get funding. They don't necessarily want to take risks, that they include artists. And they don't want to take a risk if they know the call is competitive, because then they have this one artist there, however it's written into whatever part the artist would be contributing. They think, oh, this will sort of collapse our possibility. So these are issues which exist, I think, a lot in the, I don't want to be super negative about the science side, but I think more in the heads of science, whereas the arts is more open for including. However, arts is also super conservative many times, absolutely horrifyingly conservative, their expectations and what the scientist then should do, and what is the artist doing, and so on. So there's a lot of conservatism on that side also. And coming probably from not necessarily so much of funding structures, but from expectations of the art world.
I still think that arts are a little bit more focused on the process, not always, but in research, I don't think it really exists. It's quite a lot about like not just gathering your data, but also like looking into them and seeing where it took us. And regarding what you were saying about like working across different disciplines, I don't know, bringing artists to academia and seeing what will happen, I think that it's, as you said, it's a risk because nobody knows what will happen. But if you work in like methods which are already tested for many years, it's kind of a safe bet. Like, you know exactly how it works.
You can promise certain things.
Exactly. And it might be so that, you know, this experimental team of people, you know, will just not do good. Maybe there is nothing, you know, but if you do not go there, you will never know.
Exactly. Yeah. And there are, I think, several projects where it's basically there's a research which is funded separately, and then an artist is asked to join with their own funding. So often it can be also this way. So in that sense, they try to avoid the risk taking.
You're welcome, but not that much.
Yeah, exactly. You're welcome with your own wallet to come in or finding.
You're welcome, but you take the risk. But it also makes me think that we are talking now about the teams of people coming from different backgrounds, but I think it's happening more and more, and it's not like a recent event that a singular human merges discipline within themselves. I think people often think, like if you know 2 or more things, it means that you do not know anything very well.
Yeah, I think this is the typical traditional thinking that you would need to know in depth about one thing. I think, for example, I am a generalist, so I know quite a lot on many things. Do I know anything in depth? I'm not sure, honestly. So this is another way. So I'm a prime example of this. What is usually considered not knowing kind of much.
But you know, like I totally identify myself the same, and I always say that I am good in building connections in between these various things, but I'm not good in going in depth in the elements which got connected. Yeah. So that's my superpower.
But it can maybe it's also, you know, that the interest in people like us is in this connection, this kind of relation building. And one could go probably in depth into that between 2 fields, but it probably doesn't exist. You know, where can you go in depth? Is there material for that? You know, maybe it's something like that. I don't know.
So we are talking here about connecting art, science, and technology, and let's drop there also socially engaged to that pot. And now it's becoming even more complex. I wonder, is always so that art and technology is socially engaged?
That's a good question. In today's world, I think so, because there is, like, okay, we are talking Western world now. So most of us deal with technology on a daily basis, phones, laptops, whatever. And this is, of course, a privileged position. But nevertheless, it's our world where we are ending up living. And even if that is not art, then I think there's a social engagement with that. So if you work as an artist with technologies, I think, well, art in general, I mean, you do it to show it, don't you? So isn't that already a social engagement? However, like what I have sort of kind of speculated a little bit looking into the fields of this social engagement and participatory art, which are quite back on the table at the moment. And of course, there's a histories with these from the art history, from situationists and probably even before. But from there, then Joseph Beuys doing, you know, these tree plantings and some other actions and making quite interesting claims as well. And then I think the 80s is maybe the black hole year where there wasn't that much. I'm sure people were doing, but it was not in fashion in the art world. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the last years, I think last decade, maybe 2, it came back, and even longer. And I think that sort of started with this kind of small networks which were established often we try to train females with technologies, or we try to do this, or we'll collaborate. And like you said earlier, something about this kind of a small scale entities. So I think it's pretty clear that these entities, even if they at the first sight didn't look like art necessarily for people, they were, and they are still, the counterback to the big, more commercial art world and even museums and so on. So this establishment, which is maybe staying more same, and these are the ones which actually do the interesting activities, the experimental, the new, the radical, and they're happening in these. So I think that's sort of interesting in the social engagement is this side. However, I have related to non-humans also, or asked, but this links also now to the same, like I said already, about the technologies and this, that how is social engagement with technologies or through technologies, and where's the non-humans sort of a space and area, and how should we think about it? I mean, these are questions, of course. But yeah, so that's sort of how I'm thinking currently about the social engagement. So the flourishing of small collectives, communities, organizations, associations is a kickback for the big art world. And that's why they are super important.
Yeah, the only kind of, I think, a dark side of that would be, I don't want to sound now that I'm looking for negative sides, but with whole acknowledgement of that it's such a positive phenomena, but I think it's still so if it's made by small collectives, kind of underground stuff, it's extremely niche. Yes. It doesn't have much chance to go out of there. And even if so, it will be somehow recognized by the contemporary arts. I don't know, it will be shown in Venice, wherever.
Documenta this year.
Exactly. It's another niche, maybe a little bit bigger bubble, but who goes to Documenta? So if we talk socially engaged, then what society you exactly, what part of the society you exactly mean? And I think that I even experience it a lot with this podcast, who is listening to it? Aren't those people who are already informed about those topics? And even though if it would reach people who are not informed, is this narrative anyhow kind of to be followed? You know what I mean, no? Because it also follows it starts from particular viewpoint, perspective. And if you are not standing there and you are not looking from that point, things might be looking very different. And this what we are talking here is but
it's a polarization, isn't
exactly.
it? Like in the politics, it happens also in the arts and so on.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it is a good question, niche or not niche. Is it important? And then at some point it's all consumed by the big sort of art machinery, and then it's no longer experimental. Then it's accepted. So there's always this weird thing, you have the kind of the sort of main parent culture. I think it's Dick Herbert uses the word parent culture and subculture. And the parent is the big and the established and everybody knows. The subcultures are ones which sort of go against that. And of course, at some point, easily it's maybe the Documenta is an example. Is it now kind of being swallowed? And what's then the point of what happens to it? But maybe this is the same, Now, thinking a little bit differently, why am I working as an artist with sciences, technologies? Maybe it's that because it's an open ground more. It's not that defined yet, that field. So if I'm a painter, there might be quite a lot of package from the history and trying to be better or do something different. Maybe it's an easy way out in a way for an artist also. You go to the field where it's freedom to do something. Is it sensible? I don't know. Maybe it's the same than sciences. There's many laboratories. People do 100,000 pipetting tests and sort of, or maybe even fail their careers, and then one gets it. So maybe it's the same with this experimental scene that we are the kind of the test bunnies or part of that kind of thing, and someone gets it, and most of us maybe don't.
Yeah,
I don't know.
But now it came to my mind, since we are sitting and recording, that you were co-creating a podcast too. Is it still on, or it's like a finished?
No, we made with Kira O'Reilly 4 episodes of podcast.
Okay.
First time in my life, I think both of us.
Yeah.
And that was a project which is still ongoing. It was on ticks, but not necessarily podcasts coming, I don't know. But there we talked with scientists about the tick talks. And of course one can listen to those, but it's not like a podcasting as such as there's a new episode, but it was a one way, like you said, that wanted to do podcast or kind of what is this? Then for us that moment, we had collected quite a lot of information and experiments and like a little bit puzzled, what is coming out? We know a lot, but how do you share it? So that was a thought. Then I think Kira suggested it, that maybe we could make that, and in that sense ask some of the scientists we had been talking and looking at things and reading papers and so on, to ask them and come and talk to us.
You're going to record more episodes, or this was
I don't know.
Okay.
Not at the moment. Everything at the moment is a little bit slow progress. So I'm more maybe actively working on some other things right now. But it's all the time sort of on the side, well as I have a sort of a tick terrarium in my home.
You do? Still?
Yeah, of course.
You have it all year round?
Yeah, well, yes. They live quite modestly. They're good organism in that sense. They only eat 3 times in their lifetime.
But what do you feed them with?
Well, this is the question I have had, but they have quite a long, between, and can have even longer in between. But I have been trying to build, and that's sort of ongoing, a kind of a system where I could put maybe blood in it. Though some historical research says that it's just they would drink also water or something like that. But I'm thinking kind of, well, they would need blood. And I've tested some, but I didn't. It's not yet successful, but it's under progress, but slowly.
So what's the lifespan of a tick?
Currently the researchers think it's approximately 3 years. So
that's quite long.
Yeah, and they drink they change their shape from 1 year to another, and then they need a blood meal, and at the end females need for reproduction. However, old historical research says that the ticks can even hibernate 10 years. Nobody knows if this is true, but I think that it might be longer than just 3 years.
But I am thinking, like, during this conversation, although we are talking on Ferment Radio, we didn't talk enough about maybe bacteria and like a microbial. But I know that ticks actually they carry bacteria, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you can tell something about that.
So tick is considered as a vector in the kind of a biological system. That means there's a horizontal transfer. So from one species to another species. And often they might get the for example, Borrelia, which is the Lyme disease. They get that pathogen from, for example, from a deer. And when they bite that, and then maybe goes a year, and then they eat the second meal. And then the pathogen lives in them that time, and then it's transferred to another. And ticks have many pathogens, but just few of them are kind of not so good for humans. So there is, and for example, like getting the Borrelia from the deer, The deer doesn't suffer from it.
This is what I wanted to ask.
Yeah. And it's quite interesting, actually, in terms of our cats and dogs. The cats don't suffer from them, but dogs can suffer from that. And I don't know why, but my suspicion is that it's something to do with the domestication and closeness to humans.
Wow.
But it's interesting, isn't it?
Super interesting.
And if you want, because I always like this kind of weird stuff. So there's another pathogen, and it's I can't remember now the name, but it's a pathogen. It's not common in Finland, at least yet, but apparently it's in Denmark already. And that's a pathogen. So if the tick bites you, you will become allergic to red meat. Which is interesting. It's sort of all kind of good for the planet, isn't it?
Yeah. Maybe.
But you get quite sick then also. So there's a kind of interesting, this sort of our relation, and that is somehow so that most of the mammals have it. I don't know if dogs and cats, but like the deers and sheep and so on, they have it and they don't suffer from it. And we eat, for example, sheep meat or something, and that has that I now can't remember, but I think it's a virus, not bacteria. I'm not sure, but I think it's a virus. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. So they have that virus, but when we eat it as meat, it doesn't affect us. But if it comes from a tick, so basically kind of an injection, in a way, straight to the blood, then it affects us. However, the interesting thing is, I think I have never been bitten by a tick.
Seriously?
Yes. And I think that there was one research paper, but it was so small, the take on people, where they were looking into if ticks preference certain blood type over another. Similar was actually done with this COVID coronavirus thing, and there they also kind of were looking. But was just very small, I think a Czech research, where they looked at that and they came to a conclusion that there is differences. However, I think the take on it, the amount of people and so on, what they were testing was quite small. So I don't know how reliable, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because some people get ticks all the time. I have a feeling.
This is my impression too.
Yeah. And I think I have never been bitten. I think.
But isn't it also a bit with mosquitoes the same?
Yeah, there is so mosquitoes work in a way, there's a molecular information, so something coming out of your body flying around you. And they say it's the same in cows. They noticed it, I think, first, that some cows suffer more from mosquitoes and they have a lot around, whereas there might be one cow which doesn't have, the mosquitoes don't bite. Then the other cows go and stand by that cow. So that's also advice for humans. If you have a friend that mosquitoes never bite her or him, you should go and sit by this person.
Wow, it's been quite a journey as we span from a socially engaged art and technology, and we finished on mosquitoes and hanging out with people who are not so much liked by the mosquitoes. But I guess this is how it goes in transdisciplinary stuff.
I guess so. A bit fragmented and bouncing things here and there. But
exactly.
Thank you for joining Laura and me on this ride through the meanders of interdisciplinarity. And thank you, Laura, for guiding us through. Apologizes to our listeners for the bumpy noises here and there. The road through interdisciplinarity is definitely not smooth, and the recording setting during this conversation was new to me. If you would like to know more about the show, listen to this episode again, or find previous episodes, please go to fermentradio.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. I'm always looking forward to hearing from you at hello@fermentradio.com. Ferment Radio is produced by Super Eclectic and is brought to you by Arts Promotion Center Finland, Culture of Cultures, and the Center of the Social Study of Microbes. This particular episode was recorded during a residency at the BioArt Society Finland. Thank you very much for the support, and most of all, thank you all for listening. Keep fermenting and stay tuned for the next episode of Ferment Radio.